What do you love about the future? If the future does not include being out there among the stars and being multi-planet species, I find that incredibly depressing.
The Interplanetary Podcast. The exploration of space for the benefit of all mankind. Your hosts here in London, Matthew Russell and Jamie Franklin.
I'm trying to place the accent. Who are you going for?
A Norwegian accent, because I know Elon Musk is a fan.
Oh, old Muskie.
Do-da-do-da-do-da. Oh, yeah, baby Musk.
Well, thank goodness you included it. I know that there would have been literally tens of emails. Very upset.
We had to bring it back.
Yeah, big time. We brought it back.
Popular demand.
Elon Musk, the 15-year-old Twitter user.
He's such a character, isn't he, that Elon Musk?
Do you know what? It's really weird. When we started this podcast, I was like a massive fanboy. And now I think he's incredibly clever. But I just, more and more, I'm just turned off. I'm sorry, Matt.
Well...
do you know what I should do? Is basically just unfollow him on Twitter and then just look at his work in the space world. That's what I should do.
That's it. Well, I think maybe we concentrate too much on people's personalities and not sort of praise the issues. For example, he's done this week. I mean, let's face it, this week is just absolutely monumental.
Very true.
For Elon Musk.
Let's look at what he's done.
Well, yeah. Okay, so August the 2nd on Sunday, as we predicted, not particularly hard, that one. August the 2nd was the return of Bob and Chunky from the International Space Station.
Yes.
In, of course, the Dragon, which concludes the entire test demo flight, which apparently went insanely smoothly.
Insanely smoothly?
Everyone was shocked by how smooth it was.
That's what she said?
Yep, as Jim Bridenstine said, we are entering a new era of spaceflight. And Elon Musk made a speech that actually, every now and then I watch Elon and he makes a speech and I'm endeared by him again. I know, but because I like what he says. I sometimes really like the things that he says and sometimes I really hate the things that he says. It's not him, Jamie.
No.
We should just pick on the issues.
We should.
Musk is just a man.
I don't think we're really picking on him though. I just think he's a bell end on Twitter. That's it, full stop. but everything else, fantastic. I think he's thick-skinned enough to take it, as if he'll ever hear me say that sentence. And if you do, well, don't worry about it, Elon. You're a very lucky man.
But Jamie, did you stay up to watch another new era in space flight essentially start? Did you stay up and watch it? The 150 meter.
Stay up, but I sure as
hop.
heck saw the videos next day. Pretty amazing, no?
It was absolutely so exciting stopping up because I'd stopped up the night before, and of course it didn't happen. Just at the last minute, it all vented off all the fuel. But this time, it did happen, and it's just surreal watching it in real time because you can't quite believe that it's working. I mean, this is like a single Raptor engine lifting a massive 30-meter tall stainless steel grain silo type building. And it's able to gimbal and all that kind of stuff.
It's amazing.
Around.
I think the fact it's weird, isn't it? That your eye, and just because it doesn't have, it just looks so. It just looks like it's going to topple, but it doesn't.
Well, it is like sort of balancing a pencil in the palm of your hand, isn't it? And that's what's happening on the bottom by a totally revolutionary engine and design and everything else. The whole thing is actually incredible. The fact that he's doing it out in the open, designing it, and just stainless steel rolls being welded together in a tent out in the. It's just insane. It's so cool.
Pretty old. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah. Well, he's done. It has to be said. He gets up in the morning and he's got to think about solar panels and cars and rockets and NASA
boring.
and boring, yeah, and he's got a new baby, and he's got a pop star girlfriend stroke wife, and you've got to admit that it's still pretty epic. However you look at it, he does some terrible tweets,
absolutely epic. Yeah,
we all say stupid things.
We do. Yes.
Have you noticed I'm slightly veering back into Musk fan mode?
Well, clearly, I'm not going to anger you anymore, Matt.
I'm totally with you with how ridiculous his tweets are.
Yeah, it's just a bit embarrassing, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm sure. Tesla, the person, I think was probably pretty similar, or Edison, well, these people, they're flawed, but they push humanity. They push humanity forward.
Exactly, and we like characters, don't we?
No,
so there we go.
Absolutely, Jamie. The week belonged to SpaceX for sure.
It did.
I want to do a massive shout out to Jill Norman, who has left the BIS this month after 4.5 years of sterling service.
I love Jill.
I love Jill, and I just want to say thank you very much, Jill, for everything that you did for us. It was absolutely vital for the start of the Interplanetary podcast.
Jill was there right at the beginning. When we had 0 followers, about 5 or 10 less than we have now. And, she just was instrumental, wasn't she, Matt? All of the help when she didn't need to. Letting us use the library for interviews, making us drinks, helping us with events.
Yeah, the 100th podcast, Jill, was vital.
She absolutely was. Thank you so much, Jill.
You're a legend. Please stay in touch. And maybe we'll get you on the show one day when you've built your own rocket company.
It's got to be done.
Yeah. I also wanted to mark today is the 61st anniversary of Explorer 6.
Oh, wow. 65.
Yeah. Now, Explorer 6 took the first ever photo of Earth from orbit.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. 17,000 miles over Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
The photo, to be fair, is absolute garbage.
Oh,
I mean, it's monumental, but it's not particularly good. I mean, you'd have to be pretty amazing to be able to sort of pick any detail out from it. Another first was that it was a satellite used as target practice for anti-satellite missiles.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, so
didn't know that.
Yeah, there was this air-launched missile called Bold Orion, which I suppose is a bit like the Virgin Orbit. It kind of looks like it anyway. And this is back in the early 60s, late 50s. And it was the first ever interception of a satellite. And what it did is it passed about 4 miles away from Explorer. And you think, well, that's not particularly good. But if it had got a nuclear warhead on board, it would have taken that satellite out. So all that technology had started way back then. But of course, the world was frowning upon space becoming a place of conflict, so the US stopped working on it. Or did they? I mean, I don't know.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. And of course, Viking 2 got in orbit around Mars on this very day in 1976. So there's a little bit of history, Jamie.
Well, I, for one, thank you.
And of course, this week, we did see the last of the missions to Mars for the next 2 years. So all the Mars missions are on their way to Mars. So well done. The epic Mars 2020 Perseverance rover and helicopter Ingenuity are on their way to Mars as we speak, as is United Arab Emirates Hope and the Chinese Taiwan I think that's what it's called. I can't remember.
Well, good luck, everyone.
All on their way. Everyone.
Matt, when you said helicopter, I got really excited because I keep forgetting that that's going to be a thing.
I know. To be fair, that is
to Mars.
It's going to Mars. What would be really cool is if Perseverance cameras track the helicopter as it's flying around, so we actually see it. Really, I'm very much looking forward to it.
I am too.
Jamie, I've got an excellent guest later on.
Well, you better have. Who we got?
He's called Alberto Caballero. I really struggled with his name. Alberto Caballero. And he has a project called Solar One, which is a paper he's written about an interstellar spacecraft. which is very, very interesting. I ran it past Kelvin. He hadn't seen it, so it's. I will put a link to the paper itself. He's asking for people to get involved. So if you're out there and you want to sort of check his paper through, get it peer reviewed, then do so. I kind of chuck a few questions his way, but I saw a related story, not really that related, but I saw a related story last night while writing the podcast, and I thought, well, let's do this. This is quite cool. So it's a paper called Nuclear Fusion Reactions in Deuterated Metals. Am I piquing your interest, Jamie?
Well, I tell you what, I was going to say, if there are any single people out there, just put that as your Tinder profile in your bio. And I tell you what, I mean, talk about swipe right.
Yeah. So this is a NASA paper.
Yeah.
Lots and lots and lots of people involved on this one. But I picked it up in IEEE Spectrum. And they broke it down for me, which was lucky because I was... Break it down, because I was finding it a little bit confusing. So the IEEE Spectrum article was called Spacecraft of the Future Could Be Powered by Lattice Confinement Fusion.
I'll explain it to you.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Offline, of course.
Oh, okay. So, right. Well, you explained it to me earlier on, and I'm now going to give your explanation, Jamie.
Yeah, please.
Stop me if you think I've got something wrong.
Okay.
So as we know, Jamie, when you think about nuclear fusion, other than the sun, you think about these enormous facilities that are being built in France and America. These enormous tokamaks or laser facilities.
Good word, that.
Huge just massive magnets. Massive. I mean, they're huge. Basically, these are huge facilities to try and get the temperatures and pressures that are in the sun so that you can start nuclear fusion. Obviously, that's not particularly useful for a spacecraft.
No.
Right? And there's lots wrong. Well, I mean, you've got your two different types, really. You've got your nuclear fusion and nuclear fission. Fusion obviously fuses things together. And the easiest thing to do to fuse together are things really light atoms with things like hydrogen.
Yeah.
That have got really small nuclei. Whereas nuclear fission, it's much easier to use the massive ones like uranium and push those together. But of course, there's a limited supply of uranium. Plus you have byproducts. And so nuclear fusion is often considered a lot cleaner. And that's the way we want to go. No kind of byproducts other than helium, which is a bonus rather than a bad thing.
Totally.
This nuclear fusion in a lattice confinement seems to be exceedingly lightweight. So all you need is some metal, some hydrogen, and an electron gun.
Is that all?
That's it. Nuclear fusion, you get energy because as you push two elements together, they create a new, heavier element in the periodic table. But that new element may not be as heavy as the two previous elements. So there's a missing mass. And of course, that mass change has been converted into energy, just like is happening in the sun. So the sun, it powers itself from converting hydrogen into helium and that missing mass gets turned into energy, which literally is the source of all our energy on Earth. Full stop.
Full stop, with a capital letter.
With the exception of a bit of nuclear energy that we use. So, and I just want to get this in, Arthur Eddington was the person that first suggested that hydrogen-helium fusion could be the primary source of the sun's energy back in 1920.
Yes.
100 years ago. So only 100 years ago. But Arthur Eddington pops up all the time, doesn't he?
He really does. Welcome back, Arthur.
He really does. Mr. Eddington. So
I
presume. So the great thing about this, of course, is it's lightweight, which means we can send it into space. But also, the problem with a lot of nuclear reactors is the amount of radiation that comes off. And normally that's bad. That's quite bad. You don't want a source of radiation in your spaceship necessarily.
Definitely not.
But it turns out this one might be easier than you think. So it's not cold fusion, which has pretty much been debunked. It's a low energy fusion, but it still gets very hot. So this is how it works. So the lattice part is the crystal structure of metal itself. And in this case, they used erbium or titanium. They use both. And what you do is you get a special type of hydrogen, deuteron, which is one proton and one neutron. Normally, a lot of hydrogen is just one proton with an electron whizzing around, but you can have deuteron, one proton, one neutron, and you can confine that in a sort of metal prison in the crystal lattice of the metal. So what you do is you pump in this deuteron gas into the metal, and it gets sort of trapped in the crystal lattice. It gets really packed tightly together, so that you've almost made solid hydrogen in this metal jail. But as it gets loaded into the metal jail, obviously the lattice starts falling apart, so the metal becomes a kind of powder in the end. But you've got these deuterons really, really close together. So one proton, one neutron pairs, all really close together. But they're still not quite close enough to fuse. And obviously one of the reasons why that is because they're both positively charged. So they really don't want to be pushed together. But you've got them as close as you can get them. But they're still pushing apart. They're really pushing apart. So normally the way to push them together is by using absolute brute force, like the brute force of these massive tokamaks or lasers and everything else, where you just basically increase the temperature to ridiculously high temperatures and pressures to force these things together, at which point they get close enough that the strong nuclear force can tunnel through this barrier, the Coulomb Barrier as it's called.
Yes.
So this Coulomb Barrier imagine pushing two magnets together and you feel that force repelling them. It feels like a little ball in between the there's something very, very satisfying about it. But it's a sort of similar thing with these two protons that you're trying to push, these atomic nuclei that you're trying to push together. They're repelling each other.
Yes.
But think about quantum mechanics, Jamie, is that the nuclei, there's a probability that it's in a different place all the time, right? Now, quantum tunneling basically suggests that there's a probability that the nuclei is actually the other side of the barrier. And that's what's known as tunneling. So it kind of tunnels through this barrier by just being statistically likely to be on the other side at any given point. You get me?
God.
Yeah, but that's the genius about quantum mechanics. But yes, so quantum tunneling, that's what it is. So the strong force suddenly takes over. Now, at that point, you have fusion because the strong force brings these two atomic nuclei together to create a bigger nucleus. But a little bit of energy is released. Well, a little bit, an enormous amount of energy really is released. And that's what you want.
That is what you want.
So why is this working? Well, this is working in this lattice because you've got all these deuterons right next to these atomic nuclei right next to each other, and they can be pushed closer and closer. And how they do it, they've got this electron beam that they shine onto tungsten. The tungsten then releases X-rays, which are high-energy photons. Yeah. So these high-energy photons are focused into a beam into this powdery titanium hydrogen mix lattice thing, right? Now, as the photons go in, some of them hit a deuteron nuclei.
Okay.
And it knocks the neutron off, right? And the neutron goes whizzing around and hits another deuteron and knocks that pair apart and just keeps knocking around. And as you sort of get this inside the lattice more and more violent as everything's knocking around and smashing around, i.e. the photons are stirring up all this trouble.
Bloody
and
photons.
Smashing everything up.
Why is it always them?
And everything's bashing around inside. And then the lattice has this extra quality that because of the negatively charged electrons that are part of the lattice itself, it kind of shields the positively charged deuterons from each other. So they don't really see that they're sort of moving towards this positively charged ball. And so it's kind of like a sort of magic trick almost. And at the last second they go, oh no, I'm just about to hit something of the same charge, but it's too late. And they get smashed together. In pops the strong nuclear force, tunnels through, and hey presto, you have fusion.
Bob's your uncle. There we go.
So not only have you packed these deuterons really close together, but the lattice itself seems to be helping with this electron field, electron shielding around these deuterons that increase the chances of them creating fusion.
God damn!
And NASA have proved this effect. They've this team that have written this paper have actually shown that that's what's happening. So you can get this really simple fusion going in just this powder without this massive machinery. So this could be really, really exciting. You know, it's small enough to do and probably cool enough that you can power laptops and stuff like that.
Sounds like me, small and cool, and I power a laptop.
But you've still got the problem of neutrons flying around. The problem with neutrons flying around, they've got very, very high energy, and it's very hard to soak them up or to try and stop them because they don't have a charge. But there is some evidence in this type of nuclear fusion that often you get helium as a byproduct rather than neutrons, and it can also fuse with the actual lattice itself. So you get this extra bit of energy coming from Oppenheimer-Phillips stripping reactions.
Whoa. You went there.
You don't want these neutrons escaping because they smash into the machinery, break it, they rip apart your DNA, they make things radioactive. So it's not great. But if they can sort of control that element, and that's the problem with all nuclear fusion reactors, of course. You've got to sort of deal with all these neutrons coming off. So it's pretty cool, isn't it? I just thought I'd flag that bit up because I'd not really seen this kind of low heat, low energy style fusion, and so that's interesting.
It really is. I'm with you. I mean, it's a confusing subject, but one that I think we can all get something from, Matthew.
If you've got snooker balls on a table, and these photons that you're pushing in, I suppose, are just loads of white balls that you keep hitting around the snooker table, and you just keep hitting them around, and obviously the balls are going to start jiggling around and getting very, very, very violent on the snooker table until at some point two of the balls are going to hit each other so hard that they smash apart, and that's kind of what you want. Obviously,
sounds painful.
That is a very, very violent snooker table right there. Have you ever seen a snooker ball break?
I haven't, no. Although I say that I watched that hydraulic press videos where they try to break all these things. I've seen one go in that. That was quite satisfying.
Oh, did it break?
Oh yeah. Well, it breaks everything.
There you go. So breaking everything, I suppose the sun is a bit like that hydraulic press, as it can break anything.
The huge rubber ball made of rubber bands was satisfying as well. I'll send you the link after.
Yeah, that does sound satisfying. I quite like that. But yeah, I mean, the analogy stands. You know, there's a certain pressure that you have to get over to break these things, and obviously on a snooker table, it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And normally you would do things like set the room on fire to try and make it work and crush the building. But this literally is a bit more subtle. It reminds me of the Aesop's fable, Jamie, about the wind and the sun, where there's a man with a coat on, and the wind and the sun have a competition about who can get the man to take his coat off. And the wind blows and blows, and the man holds his coat tighter and tighter and tighter. And then the sun just shines and the man takes his coat off because he's a bit hot.
There we go.
And it's an Aesop's fable about, sometimes the sort of kinder method gets the job done rather than the forceful method.
Are you also saying, Matt, we're just better off not doing much?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Damn it. I thought I could have an afternoon off then.
No, you've got to work, Jamie. Jamie, you've got to...
And work will make me shine like the sun?
I think it will. Oh, I think what will happen, Jamie, is...
I read you.
You need to be working to make mankind a multi-planetary species. That should be your...
trying.
That's, according to Musk, is the only way you can be getting out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. So before we move on to the interview, there are other nuclear fusion reactors in the pipeline, like the Lockheed Martin Compact Fusion Reactor, that's trying to be smaller than these enormous fusion facilities that are being built around the world at vast expense. But it turns out that these things are absolutely massive as well. And one of the problems is to stop the neutrons. So the blanket that protects the outside world from the neutrons from within inside this compact fusion reactor, and also the blanket that reflects the neutrons back in to keep the reaction going, has to be so thick and heavy that it would weigh about 300 to 1,000 tons. So when you say a compact reactor, it's still very, 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 very big. Far too big to launch into space, in fact. And at the moment, they've sort of building test ones that are about 2,000 tons, which is similar to the nuclear fission reactors that they have on board submarines and things like that. And, and aircraft carriers. So these things are absolutely massive. But, I mean, nuclear fission, there are small nuclear fission reactors like Krusty, which is the type that you see whenever you see pictures of nuclear reactors on Mars and on the moon for power. That's what that is. And that is a nuclear fission reactor where you've got a bit of uranium that is kept in.
Not just the clown in The Simpsons.
It's not. No. Named after the clown in The Simpsons. Absolutely sure. But yeah, that's where you just keep uranium that's trying to let go of all its neutrons, and then the neutrons keep getting reflected back in, and it heats up this core, and then you can use liquid sodium to power a thermal generator and produce about 1 kilowatt of energy. And they're only 1.5 tons. So that's a very promising. So, but nuclear fusion is where we want to get to. Maybe this lattice nuclear fusion is a breakthrough. Who knows? Jamie, I
think it is. Matt, when you mentioned submarines just then, my mind, when I hear that word, always goes to Europa. I still can't stop thinking about it. All these years on.
Oh, a submarine on Europa would be...
Little submarine swimming under those oceans of ice.
Yeah. I think a submarine on Titan is more likely, Jamie. Which could be...
Swimming in the methane.
Equally exciting. Well, you can get to the methane. As we've discussed, getting into the ocean of Europa is going to be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, Musk's going to solve it.
Maybe
he's going to solve it.
Musk is more concerned about becoming interplanetary at any cost. Not really a science dude. He's not really a science dude. He's more of an engineer. He's an engineer, not really concerned about whalians.
Damn it. Who is?
He's concerned about humans and engineering. Although he's not concerned about the humans on the way to Mars. Jamie, do you want to listen to my interview with good old Alberto?
I really want to listen to the interview with Alberto. Let's roll it.
Shall we do it? Coup time.
The Interplanetary Podcast, putting the ace back into space.
So I'm here with Alberto Caballero. Welcome to the podcast. Before we go on, you sent me a paper about interstellar spacecraft, the Solar One. Can you tell the listeners just a little bit about Solar One, and then we'll dive in with some questions?
Yes. Well, basically, Solar One is a new type of spacecraft, interstellar spacecraft that I propose, which is I'm not really proposing a new method of propulsion. I'm rather just combining several methods of propulsion that already exist into just one unique concept, which it integrates laser propulsion. It also has a nuclear fusion as well, in theory, and also I added a buzzer scoop into the spacecraft, which would actually use electromagnetic fields to collect hydrogen, and would also help to decelerate the spacecraft. So rather than a new method, it's rather a combination of existing methods for interstellar propulsion. That's what is new, in my opinion. That's why I say it's a new type, because I combine all of them.
I noticed that, and I thought perhaps the most noticeable part of it, I get is the deceleration phase of it that I hadn't really seen that kind of proposal before. But let's start from the beginning. So it's a bit like the Breakthrough Starshot mission in the fact that its initial propulsion is lasers, isn't it? So, but it's designed for human travel, and obviously the Breakthrough Starshot is a grain of sand being propelled across the cosmos. So, So, what are the differences really between having to propel a grain of sand and propel a human-capable spacecraft?
Yes, well, the main difference, I would say, it's power. We need much more energy to a much more powerful laser to propel a large spacecraft with humans, compared to for the Starshot project, they only need 100. Well, only it's still a lot of power. They need 100 gigawatts for between 2 and 10 minutes of continuous power to propel each of the spacecrafts up to 20% the speed of light. So it's not a huge amount of power, but it's still quite a lot. But for Solar One, we would need there are many possibilities, but one of them would be actually to use 26 terawatts of power, which I actually, that number, I took that number from Robert Forward. Robert Forward was a physicist that actually wrote a paper in 1984 suggesting that it could be possible to send a huge spacecraft with humans inside, with a total mass of 800 tons, and the spacecraft will be propelled with light sails and also with a laser. And actually, my proposal is partially based on his previous work on that. And he suggested to actually use lasers to propel a huge light sail with humans inside. So basically, yes, you need a lot of power. He suggested to use a 26 terawatt laser, which is a lot of power. And I wanted to make my calculations with that amount of power. But basically, the main energy source would be a laser for the propulsion of the light sail. But I also suggest the possibility of using sunlight instead of the laser, because I think that 26 terawatts of power is a lot. I'm not sure if we will be able to actually. I think it's like several times. There is a laser called D-Star. I actually suggest to use this laser to propel the light sail. It's called D-Star. It's a proposed laser that it is actually intended to destroy asteroids. And in the paper, they also suggest that it could be possible to use the laser to propel light sails. But Solar One would need a huge array of these lasers, even of these. Each of these lasers, the star, it's actually the power output is 100 gigawatts. So you would need like a huge array of those lasers, several of them, to actually get 26 terawatts of power. That's why I also suggest to use sunlight instead of lasers.
Right. So, I mean, just to put it in perspective, because I was trying to think exactly what a terawatt. So a terawatt of continual power. So at 1 terawatt all the time continuous power is. I was looking at. I wonder what the world's most powerful nuclear fission reactor is at the moment, and it's a Japanese one at 8 gigawatts. It can do. So it's several orders of magnitude lower than that. So it's like even with a massive full-on nuclear power station, we're still quite a long way off that. It's sometimes hard, isn't it, to think about the sort of power required, because it's so incredibly huge as an amount of. And how long would you have to be blasting this? Did you say 24 or 26 terawatts of power all the time? How long does that last for?
Exactly. What for 26 with 26 terawatts of power, I calculated 5 years of that's the impressive, the other difficult. We need 5 years of continuous power, and for the reference, one terawatt is 1,000 gigawatts. So I guess it would be 100 times what Starshot or D-Star needs. 10 times. The power of that they would use 10 times. So it's quite a lot of power during quite a lot of time. So and it will be a tremendous. I think it's the most challenging part of the whole thing. And I think Forward thought the same when he was writing the paper and he suggested 26 terawatts of power. I think he was thinking that maybe because lasers are actually increasing at a very rapid pace. It's really the amount of improvement is going really fast in terms of laser power. But I think he was really optimistic by thinking that maybe it was going to be we were able to reach 26 terawatts this century. Maybe I think we are being really optimistic. That's why I think maybe sunlight would be the best alternative.
Your sail is about a mile. A 1 mile by 1 mile sail, which is pretty monumental bit of engineering in itself, isn't it? Really, but that I can perceive as being like a doable, So, but obviously you've got to aim your laser at this craft for 5 years and continually be changing its collimation to actually focus it on this sail. How were you proposing to do that?
Yes. Well, basically, I suggest to use. I suggest something strange with this. To use mirrors to actually focus the light over interstellar distances. I think D-Star proposes something similar. The team behind D-Star, they also propose to use mirrors to actually focus the light over interstellar distances. Actually. So yes, I suggest something similar, which is to use mirrors, but flexible mirrors. One huge mirror, for example, composed of several small mirrors that actually change their orientation. So we're actually able to change the beam of the laser, the divergence of the laser beam, to actually because of the square inverse law. The light is going to. The intensity is going to decrease over time over the interstellar distances. So what I suggest is to actually change the orientation of the mirror continuously. So the beam keeps always hitting the light sail over the whole trip.
Yeah. So I mean because obviously the light sail itself is receiving a heck of a lot of thrust and a lot of energy onto it. I mean, presumably heating is one thing, but do you get the one thing I was thinking of is as soon as any part of the sail becomes deformed, that it becomes deformed even quicker because you've got this kind of extra pressure on the sail, pushing it off in a different direction to the rest of the sail. Is that a huge problem? Because it's only something I kind of was thinking about today as I was thinking, God, that is a lot of energy hitting a surface. So you start to approach all sorts of engineering problems.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I made the calculations with a specific material, carbon fiber, and which has a maximum amount of a maximum limit of temperature that it can withstand. So that's crucial. I mean, once you reach that limit, it can cause serious damage to the light sail. So basically, the power density hitting the light sail is going to be constant all the time, because the mirror is going to be changing its orientation all the time, continuously. So the main one of the engineering challenges is actually to build a laser with a material which is very light, also very reflective, and also able to withstand such high temperatures as well. So there are many challenges involved in the construction of such a huge light sail. So far, NASA, for example, has built a 40-meter light sail. I think that's the biggest light sail ever built so far on Earth, 40 meters. So the idea would actually be to work in that direction, to increase the size of the light sail, and of course, I mean, to try to find the best material for that. And I think it's a huge challenge. And also because, one of the components there, I would say there are two possibilities to gather light from the sun. Well, it would be, of course, necessary to send, whether we use a mirror or a Fresnel lens to gather light. I think it would be necessary to send the instrument close to the sun, because the closer to the sun, the higher the power density we get, the more power we need. For a distance kind of close to the sun, to a distance similar to where the Solar Parker probe will be, the closest distance, I think at that separation, we would only need a 6-kilometer mirror to actually get 26 terawatts of power. 6 kilometers of diameter, whether you use a Fresnel lens or a mirror to gather sunlight. And I have been in contact with some experts on interstellar travel, and they actually have suggested me that using a mirror would be much better. It would be really complicated to actually put a Fresnel lens close to the sun and try to gather light due to diffraction problems, diffraction difficulties there. But I think that actually, yes, we have agreed that sending a large mirror close to the sun could be a possibility. So it would be a combination of one mirror to actually gather 1 meter of 6 kilometers to gather light, and then you would need another mirror, at least another mirror, to actually focus the light in the light sail. And that secondary mirror would have to be flexible to change the orientation over time.
Whenever I think about things like these large mirrors and things like that in space, presumably that is one dangerous object if you lose control of a a mirror that's able to deliver that intensity of energy.
It would be really difficult to build such a huge mirror. I mean, it's not possible to build a mirror on Earth, because you cannot actually send to space a 6-kilometer mirror. I think it could be really difficult. So I guess it would have to be built in orbit around the Earth. Maybe you can actually build several components, several small mirrors on Earth, and actually send them to the orbit and build the whole thing on Earth. And another important challenge would be how to send that huge mirror close to the sun, because it's actually a long distance and it's a lot of weight. I calculated if we use, for example, the primary mirror of the James Webb Telescope, if we scale that up to 6 kilometers of mirror, we would actually have a mirror of 700 tons, which is a lot of. It's actually close to what Robert Forward suggested for the mass for his spacecraft proposal. So 700 tons, it's quite a lot of mass to actually send that close to the sun. So we would need something, some propulsion system, maybe ion drive engines or ion drive, or something like that, something really powerful to actually send that close to the sun. It would take quite a long time to actually send it close to the sun. And then, yes, of course, there would be many challenges as well when it comes to actually pointing. Well, maybe you need. I'm not sure if you would need several of them or just one, because obviously the whole mirror would actually orbit the sun, and you actually want the best efficient projection of light in the light cell. So maybe it would be necessary to build several of them. It's a really huge. It will be probably the most difficult challenge in engineering in the whole history of humanity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, until we get, I think, to the actual, so the spacecraft itself. So we've managed to get the spacecraft. Say if we build this mirror and we build the massive, huge bank of lasers, which presumably are going out to some Lagrange point or on the surface of the moon or something like that. You've then accelerated your spacecraft up, but it's a manned spacecraft. So we've now got this super heavy spacecraft, and it's hurtling towards a star system that you've pointed it in the direction of. And now we've got the terrible thing that we have to slow down after getting up to a third of the speed of light, and we got to slow down. So I thought the interesting part of this one was that your proposal of how you slow the spacecraft down. Yeah,
exactly. Basically, for example, Forward suggested to actually use 2 light cells, and one of them, he also suggested to use a Fresnel lens to focus the light, and then when the light hits the primary cell, the light goes to the secondary cell. And that's a way to actually slow down the spacecraft. But you need a huge Fresnel lens. So what I suggested is actually something a little bit different, which is actually to include a buzzard scoop inside the spacecraft, because you actually need a lot of fuel. I calculated for the nuclear reactor, you need 5,000 tons of nuclear fuel of hydrogen. So it's quite a lot of fuel. So that's why I decided to include a buzzard scoop inside the spacecraft, inside the prototype, and basically the buzzard scoop would be collecting hydrogen. No, the buzzard scoop would only be used during the deceleration, not during the acceleration, because if you use it during the acceleration, the buzzard scoop produces drag, which actually stops. It keeps stopping the spacecraft. So it's actually it would only be turned on during the deceleration, and because I mean the main disadvantage of the buzzard scoop is that it produces drag that it stops the spacecraft, and that's an advantage for Solar One because it would only be used during the deceleration. So that drag that the scoop produces, it would actually help to decelerate Solar One, and it would actually the main thing that would decelerate the spacecraft.
Yeah,
yeah.
I've just got one quick question. So when you say switch it on, do you mean flare it out, or actually switch it on in terms of switch its electronics on where it's acting magnetically?
Exactly. Yeah, the electricity to create the magnetic fields. Once another possibility could be maybe to move. If it's not possible to turn off the scoop, maybe during the whole trip, the scoop would be turned reverse. It would be facing Earth, so there is no drag. There's no possible drag because the scoop is facing Earth. But and once you start this deceleration, you move the scoop up to the front, to the frontal part of the spacecraft to actually create that drag. But I think it could be possible to actually, I have been talking with people, and we have agreed on the possibility of actually turning on and off the scoop with electricity. Yeah.
Okay. So and so it's slowing down, but it's not just the scoop, is it, that's slowing down? You've got a laser at the front also providing some form of deceleration.
Well, the problem with the laser is that the thrust that it provides, it's really, really low. It's like so. Indeed, it would produce some negative thrust, so to decelerate the spacecraft. But the main objective of the laser is actually to ionize hydrogen. And it's actually, that was actually proposed in several papers on the Buzzard scoop. People working on that proposed to use a laser to ionize the hydrogen, so you are able to capture the protons much better. You need actually a much smaller scoop to gather those protons. So that would be the main thing, to actually reduce the main objective of the laser is to reduce the size of the scoop and to better able to gather the protons, to gather the field needed for the nuclear fusion, for the nuclear reactor to work.
Yeah, so you've got this the Buzzard scoop and the laser. So to power the laser, you've got another one of these a terawatt nuclear fusion on board. So that's the bit that I'm finding a little bit terrifying, is that this thing presumably weighs a lot. Like we said, it's 8,000 megawatts for the most powerful nuclear. I know it's a different technology, but nuclear fission, the most powerful sort of power plant on Earth is orders of magnitude away from the power required just for this laser. And presumably this laser is going to be running for how many years? 20 years or something? Or
well, no, for the laser it would only be 5 years.
5 years,
5 years for the acceleration, then the cruise speed, and then another 5 years, which is a lot of time for 5 years for.
So you've got this huge, because I was looking at and in the paper in the paper you've got this Lockheed Martin style one that was, I can't remember, it's 200 tons for a 200 megawatt. So we know that this is going to be hugely massive as a thing, and then yes, you've got the fuel, but you're saying most of the fuel that you require for this nuclear fusion is coming via the scoop at the front. Is that right, or would you still need to carry a whole bunch of fuel?
No fuel needed. You would only actually gather the fuel. Well, for my proposal, of course. I mean, there are some proposals that actually propose to have some fuel on board and to create reactions with the fuel coming from space. There are many possibilities, but in my proposal, I only suggest to use the fuel coming from being collected from space, and actually not as soon as you gather the fuel would be actually used for the nuclear. So the idea would be not to actually gather fuel on board, because that would increase the weight of the whole spacecraft. So the idea is, as soon as you get the fuel, you actually use it for in the nuclear engine. And yeah, of course, I mean with the well, as you know, this compact nuclear fusion reactor. Of course, we are not able to create nuclear fusion yet efficient in an efficient way. Well, the other day there were some good news from France. They are actually starting to build this huge nuclear fusion station. But of course, compact fusion reactors is a whole different thing. It's much more complicated. You need to build everything much more smaller. So yeah, exactly as you mentioned, Lockheed Martin has been talking about 200 tons for, I think, 200 tons for 200 megawatts. So still, that would be, I mean, that's the goal they have, the objective. And still, we would need a much more efficient for Solar One. So well, the person behind this compact fusion reactor was actually patented by Salvatore Pais, who is I'm sure you are aware of him. He's an engineer. And the U.S. Navy, I think, it's really interested in his concept. He actually bought the patent, and the patent is actually assigned to the U.S. Navy right now. So I think the U.S. Navy right now, it's kind of working on this thing. I think they are pretty much interested. I think it's a good thing for us that they are interested. I guess they want the technology for the submarines. The submarines, they are now working with fission, and they want it would be a huge difference when they get fusion reactors for the submarines. So I think they are really interested in the patent. And right now it's actually science fiction, but I think it could be possible. They are working on it. I think the whole thing is secret. because they are not, at least when you search for that in the internet, at least me, I wasn't able to find much information. And I guess that it has to be secret, because after all, it's the U.S. Navy working on technology for their submarines. So I think it's normal that we don't find information. And Salvatore Pais he didn't include. I think he didn't mention any mass in his work, in his paper. He did not suggest any specific mass. He just said compact fusion reactors. So we can be talking about 200 tons. We can be talking about 20 tons. We are not sure, because the designer of the prototype, of the idea of that compact fusion reactor, he didn't mention. Okay, my proposal is going. My design would weight a specific amount of mass. He didn't say anything. I think I didn't find any number for that. So we are actually kind of blind. We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I did notice one of the criticisms about that type of compact nuclear fusion was that a lot of the sort of nuclear fusion scientists are saying actually bigger is better, that the sort of larger you go, you get it's much easier to contain the plasma and all these kind of things, and you get almost, if you double the size of your reactor, you get 4 times the energy. So it seems that maybe making it compact in the first place might be causing more problems than like going that, like it's much better to get a bigger reactor and make it smaller rather than a small reactor and make it bigger, if you see what I mean. That's the kind of impression I got, that some people were sort of, that was the objection that I saw some people making about those smaller, the smaller nuclear fusion reactors. But I mean, it's the amount of energy required, like 5 years of terawatts.
Exactly.
It's phenomenal, isn't it? I mean, what I love about papers like this is you start to realize just what an enormous problem interstellar travel is, that you start to put the numbers together and they just seem utterly incredible. But I suppose if we were sitting here 500 years ago, we might be saying the same thing about, going to the moon or even just aircraft travel around the globe. So it's an interesting conversation, isn't it? What kind of timelines would you have on a craft like this? When would you expect anyone to be able to even contemplate building it?
Well, some expectations, some suggestions were about about nuclear fusion. Some experts were saying that maybe 2035. By 2035, we could have the first spacecraft powered with nuclear fusion, entirely powered with 2035. That number has been recently actually been changed, updated to something a little bit later. Maybe 2050, I'm not sure. I guess
it is a recurring joke, isn't it, with nuclear fusion, that it's always 20 years away. I mean,
exactly, that's true.
It's been 20 years away all my life, just annoyingly. I remember being in the playground going, well, we'll have nuclear fusion in 20 years, so by the time I'm 28, it'll be fine.
Yeah, that's true. What I find promising is the nuclear. The nuclear station that is being built. It's being built in France. I think that is highly promising. I think once they start working on that, building the whole thing, I think at some point we will be able to actually produce. I'm optimistic, and I think that we will be able to produce nuclear fusion efficiently this century. But when it comes to compact fusion reactors, I have no idea. Maybe this century, maybe next century, maybe there is a breakthrough by someone whose work is based on Salvatore Pais. I guess that you never know. I mean, what can happen in the future? Of course, we need several breakthroughs. That's for sure. But the good thing about Salvatore is that, in my opinion, is that usually nuclear fusion reactors use superconducting magnets to actually for the containment, and I think Salvatore Pais uses a small conical dynamic fusers. So that's why he suggested that his prototype could be actually smaller than the typical large. So I think he suggests to produce the same amount of energy, but with much less weight due to the different configuration of the magnets. So, rather than magnets, he proposed to use conical dynamic fusers. So that's why I think his proposal a little bit optimistic, optimistic, but I think to a certain degree, because I think I don't know. I mean, the U.S. Navy has bought the patent, so I guess it's not really a stupid proposal. I think they have found the proposal kind of interesting. So I guess that the many people right now is working on this thing. But of course, we need several breakthroughs, But my idea with Solar One is to try to propose something that would use the resources of the solar system as much as we can. Of course, we need a high level of technology to do that, but I think it would allow us to save a lot of energy, because if we use sunlight instead of lasers, I think it's despite all the engineering challenges involved, I think it could be easier for us to actually use sunlight instead of lasers. And for the nuclear fuel as well, in my opinion, I think it would be easier to actually gather the fuel on board while the spacecraft is traveling, rather than actually having taking the fuel on board, which would actually increase the mass of the spacecraft quite a lot, in the order of thousands of tons. So I think that it would be ideal to actually try to use some of the resources of the solar system And the other thing is that, for example, nuclear fusion has been proposed for interstellar travel many times. I mean, to build a Daedalus and an Icarus interstellar spacecrafts that would use just nuclear fusion to actually travel to the stars. But the thing is that they would need, because they only use nuclear fusion, the amount of fuel that they need is actually tremendous. I think Icarus would need thousands of tons of fuel to actually propel the spacecraft. And the same for antimatter. You can actually build an antimatter spacecraft, but again, you would need a huge amount of antimatter to actually propel to that spacecraft to not relativistic speeds, but 20-30% the speed of light. So that's why I think that Solar One would need less amount of energy, because you would actually need, because it combines several methods of propulsion. So you don't need that amount of energy of fuel. Well, actually no fuel, because you collect the fuel, and you don't need really antimatter because, again, antimatter, there is a spacecraft that actually it's proposed by, I don't remember the person, but he suggests to have a huge laser on board, and that laser would actually break space, and it would collect antimatter, actually. But you need a petawatt laser. You need a laser which is actually much more powerful than the one that Solar One would need, and that would be much more weight, it would be much more difficult. So you would need several petawatts, maybe, in the petawatt order. There are many proposals, but what I wanted to do with Solar One is actually to suggest something that actually requires energy, but less than the other proposals that are separated, individual. They're just fusion, just antimatter.
Yeah, that's the other thing I find fascinating as well with interstellar travel, is that you've got this. What I love is the weight equation, where you've got, it's going to take, say, 20, 30 years to get there. We're going to invest billions and billions and billions into an interstellar craft. You're talking about an incredible engineering feat, only to be halfway through building it when someone says, "Oh, there's a much easier way of doing this."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that the crucial thing in this whole thing is that the military is interested. I think that once the military is interested, I think the military is working a lot on laser-directed energy weapons, to create powerful lasers with little weight to actually be incorporated to their planes or different aircrafts. So I think the military is working on lasers. I think the military is working on nuclear fusion, compact nuclear fusion reactors. The only thing is that they are not working on light sails, because that's not. I don't see the application of light sails in the military, but they are working on. So I think the more interested the military is on these things, the more money they are going to put, and the further research we're going to make. So I think it's a good thing to actually have the military working on these things for destruction rather than travel. But then we may take advantage of those discoveries to actually use it for travel.
What's your plan next with the with this design, and where can people go and have a look and have a look for themselves, and what's the next steps for you?
Well, right now the paper. I'm thinking about. I'm going to send the paper for publication, and there are a couple of important journals interested in actually its publication. So I will send it for publication this month, next month. So I think once the paper has been peer reviewed, so I think it might have a much more acceptance by the community or much more feedback. Because right now with Archive, what I wanted to do is actually put the paper so I can actually see what the general community thinks about it. To actually ask for feedback. And I have been talking with some experts on interstellar travel, and we have been exchanging views. In the final paper, in the final version, I will actually change some things. I will talk a little bit more about how to use the mirror to actually gather light from the sun. There will be some small changes in the final version. The paper is available right now in Archive, so everybody can actually. I have made a video. I have a small YouTube channel, and I have made a video about Solar One. So everybody is able to actually read the paper, watch my video, comment below, ask for, tell me some improvements in their opinion, and some of them. I read all the suggestions, and sometimes if I find something interesting, I can actually incorporate it to the paper after I do the proper research.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks very much for talking about it.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope that some people becomes interested, because that's one of the things why I do it. Is for the people. I wanted to actually to make the Robert Forward proposal to come alive again. And actually, I want people to actually work on this. To try to improve. To improve. There are many people working on Breakthrough Starshot right now, and I think it's quite related. Solar One could use some of the technology that the Starshot project could use. So I think, it could be great that more people work on this. So thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
The Interplanetary Podcast is alive!
There we go, Jamie. Lots to think about there. It's very, very much in its sort of first baby steps, his paper.
That was wicked. Thank you, Alberto. Matt, if people want to know more, where can they go?
Well, if they go to www.interplanetary.org.uk, they will find all the notes to all the shows, including lots of links and pretty pictures, and it will tell you everything you need to know. I'll put in some...
Now, Matt, we've been having dozens of people contact us asking, is it true? Can you get an Interplanetary Podcast face mask? So not only do you make the environment around you safe and yourself, but you look well cool.
You can indeed order yourself an Interplanetary Podcast face mask. I've sent some out to some of the patrons, the ones that I was being very tardy with their T-shirts. You can get mugs as well, Jamie, and clocks and posters.
Whoa!
I think I might have a bit of a refresh of designs. George is starting to come up with some wicked designs. So,
Matt, I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe we should ask the listeners. Do you have an Interplanetary Podcast design? Send it in. It might make its way onto a mug.
If you do, send it in, and we'll give you all the profits from the sales from those items.
There we go. You heard it here first.
Absolutely.
Matt, can we take that back? I'm just kidding. Guys, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, of course.
So, yes. And, of course, you can go and support us at Patreon. That's where we want the support at Patreon. Patreon.com/interplanetary. And we've had lots of lovely new members. Thank you very much. Next week, we'll be reading out the glorious patrons of gloriousness. Thank you very much. Always humbled.
That is glory.
And actually, yes, the Discord channel, lots and lots and lots of articles flying in this week that I've just simply not had time to read again. I will deal with them. There's some amazing stuff. It's so cool being on the Discord, reading what proper space fans think about stuff.
Good people, good times.
So, Jamie, shall we wrap this one up?
Let's wrap it up. By the way, Matt, before we go, did you see the moon last night? It was absolutely glorious orange hue down in the south.
I don't think I had the same thing, but I did have a beautiful full moon rising above Ilfracombe town over the hill opposite my kitchen, and it was absolutely splendid.
That is so like you to have a full moon rising.
Yeah, I was. It really was. It really was. Yeah. Beautiful moment.
All right. Well, have a good weekend, everybody, and we'll speak to you next week.
Bye-bye, Sprockets!
Matt, take your pills.